Everybody's here. I'll call this meeting to order. Here is Joel Frederick, Dan Reinhardt, Dr. Lacey Gosh, Melissa Sartain is remote, Donna Gillum, myself, Clint Shive, and Becky Stevenson. Announcement of this meeting has been duly called and the notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551043 of the Texas Government Code. We'll move right into number 2, public hearing on the proposed 25-26 budget and the 25 tax rate.
Did you click that or did I?
I did.
Okay. All right, is it on or not?
Yeah, turn it on.
Huh?
Yeah, turn it on.
It's not on? Okay. Okay. There, cool. Okay. Okay. Public hearing is required before we go into adopt the budget and tax rate, and no public is here other than us. But I will go through, nothing has changed from the previous meetings we've had on our budget. We continue to show, as we said, we will, I don't know if anything's, I don't know, you've got the attachments that show the budget. Nothing changed other than on the INS fund, we now have a specific amount after issuing the bonds. So we now know the dollar amount of those, of what will be paid next year. So the debt service has became a little more clear. And we're showing that with projected tax collections and everything, we will be on that $35,000 to positive at the end of the year. We will see where that falls as the tax collections come in. Hopefully that will all balance out. The state funding is an estimate, of course, based on what we know. It is the lower of the two estimates that I can develop with the two different spreadsheets. So we did go with the one spreadsheet that tended to be a little more conservative in what was expected in terms of revenue. But we also on the general fund, we still show a positive fund balance going through the future, and being able to sustain what the raises that were recently approved for the future. So,
Paul, I have a question.
Sure.
On the debt, the excess, where does that money go? Does it go back to pay off more of it, or?
No, it drops down in fund balance. What will be interesting is, and I can't remember if it was passed or not, they were talking about at one point that they would reduce state aid if we had a surplus of tax collections. So they were going to offset some of that so that basically we would never have another increase in fund balance. Okay. So we will see if that actually comes through or not and how that actually works. So I'm just kind of watching that legislation and watching what's being said and how it's being implemented.
But that's on the debt and the regular?
No, not on just on the debt service fund.
Okay.
Only on the debt service fund is there any kind. The debt tax collections on the M&O side is still, we need to collect as much as we can because they expect us to collect as much as we can because they want to give us as little as possible. And they have an expectation of a dollar amount, and they base their state aid on that expectation, not on what we actually. It has some effect on what we actually collect, but if we're way off, they will adjust those numbers, which is why we have which is why I've had a lot of antsy days as we've gone back and forth over with the appraisal district and with the comptroller over what they're certifying as our property values for 2024 and 2025. And why this next year in 2025, I've gotten a promise that I will see that one schedule of frozen values before it is submitted to make sure that it looks reasonable before it goes in so that I don't have 6 months worth of pain of worrying about where we're going to fall. You can see that the changes that are on there are largely in payroll, where we added the payroll that was required by the legislature, and with the raises for other staff that was given. You'll notice still, if you go to, I think it's page 5. Let's see. It's hard for me to page 5. Which shows the breakdown by payroll contracted services for the general fund. you'll see that, again, we stay that 77% of our expenditures are going to salary, which is, you'll find every school district in the state is 75 to 80% is where our salaries go, or is where it goes to salaries. The balance is largely in contracted services. A lot of that, especially is related to some sped stuff, and that we no longer can hire people because they're all basically think they can make more money as a contractor. So we can't hire that staff anymore, and we're having to pay for contracted services. So that continues to grow. Now the state's going to reimburse us for up to $1,000 per evaluation this coming year. So we budgeted some for that, but compared to what we actually are spending, it's minor. So, then I have a comparison that of where we were on actuals in 23-24 for the general fund, where we were on the original budget, where we are on our amended, and where I'm actually projecting us to be before we get down to the current proposed. And right now, I'm projecting that we should be, when I did the schedule, which was almost 2 weeks ago, I was saying about 1.1 million. Yesterday, after we ran the final payroll, I was running through all the numbers again. If the state aid holds where I think it will hold, even with where the state says, which I think is less than what I'm calculating based on spreadsheets, based on the spreadsheets used, we will be a positive 1.1 million for the year. So with that will go to fund balance, which I'm happy to see that money go to fund balance, because as our budget grows, we try to keep that 2.5. We have a policy of keeping 2.5 months of expenditures in fund balance at least. But so as our expenditures continue to grow, that 2.5 months get to be a bigger number. So we do need to keep trying to make sure that we are putting some money into fund balance. And next year's budget, we currently have a surplus going there. And that's based again on the projections of where our enrollment is, and we've already seen that we're above those enrollment numbers. So, then the child nutrition, the debt service, it shows where we will actually stand again. Than where we are, since we now have the actual debt service for next year. And the child nutrition, we will show a slight deficit, but they are still have a very healthy fund balance, which is necessary for them. There's a lot of places where school districts are having to chip in for the child nutrition services because they are not self-sustaining. We have a great manager and a great team that are doing a great job of keeping that on a positive basis. Now, the last part where that tax rate calculation sheet is attached, that is now mandatory to be attached. I had never attached it before, it's never been here before, but the legislation changed where it said you have to attach it. Kind of my interpretation, I went ahead and did it now. It may not be until next year, but I went ahead and did it now. And you'll see it on when we're adopting the budget later. You'll see it there too, because it just says when you're discussing the budget. So I don't know if that means, here or there. So I just put it in both places to be safe.
So that was one of my questions, line 25. What's that tax rate? 1.2348. What's the difference between that rate and the rate that's being proposed? Okay.
That is what is referred to as the, how do I say this? It's the voter approved tax rate. It's the rate we can, based on what our property values were last year and what we would have collected, compared to what property values are this year, taxable value, and what the tax rate would have to be to get to that same amount of revenue. It's not really there, but nobody likes this form, I can tell you this right now. But it's the maximum rate we're allowed in order to pay off the maintenance and operations and for the debt service.
So that's the voter approved rate from when? Or from where?
No, it's not even,
I thought that's what you said.
Well, it does. It's called a voter approved rate.
Okay.
Okay, I know. The terminology gets crazy because it's called a voter approved rate because they're saying you approve the bonds and you have approved, even though we haven't approved the budget, it would allow us to keep the same amount of money as we did the year before. Because it's,
Is it basically the rate that the state will allow us to charge? And we would have to go out for another voter-approved rate to go above that number, is that correct?
yes, and if we wanted to do a VATRE, or if we wanted to go above that
We'd
rate,
have
we
to go
can't go
above that
above
rate.
that rate,
Okay.
correct.
So we could essentially
Like a
raise it
ceiling.
to the 1.2348
Yes.
legally based on this number because the state said this is basically your cap, right?
Yes.
Okay,
But the only way we could go above that cap based on what we have is if we went to the debt service rate higher than 50 cents.
correct. And we can't
Which,
do this.
which,
Yeah.
which I did not know until I was having conversations about this. We actually can do that, but he said, you won't be able to issue any bonds.
That's right.
Oh,
Once-
I didn't think you could go over the 50.
I didn't think you could either, but I was told you can, but you will not be allowed to issue any more bonds until you can bring it back down.
Okay.
And this is, I guess, more of a sidebar question in hearing that conversation. Why can't you go up on the maintenance side to meet that number?
Well, we can't go up on the maintenance side unless we do a we have to go to the voters of what's called that VATRE.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Okay, because right now, the state sets a maximum
Uh-huh.
compressed rate. And that maximum compressed rate TEA gives it.
is
That's
that
the
number?
.6169. It's on here on, where's it at? On line
That's- yeah.
26, that's the that's the maximum compressed rate that the state sets.
Line 26.
Yeah. And then we currently have previously approved by either election or by the board, we had a .1059 of enrichment that had already been approved by the voters.
That was
So,
Possibly, does that go back to?
Yes, that goes-
forever in time? So
that-
way back when the original high school was built and they went out for.
well, that goes back to way back when D. Carter came
Correct,
in.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, when D. Carter came in and the district was in serious financial, they went to the voters and asked for an increase in the tax rate, and they got that. And it's come down some because they said, we will bring it down some, and they did. But that's what's left of that original approved amount. So the .6169 plus the .1059 is the maximum rate we can charge without going to the voters for an M&O rate. Now you know what my life is like.
Gotta love school finance.
Yes.
That's that .72?
Yes.
That's the .7228, yes, which is exactly the same rate as last year. And that's largely because the rate stayed the same, because the information that we gave this year for the tax rate, for that maximum compressed rate calculation, was reduced by the new homestead exemption. So we actually, when we put that number in, we were actually slightly below where our taxable value was last year without that additional homestead exemption. So that's why our rate has stayed the same, but they don't allow you to go up. Any other questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I mean, when are you learning?
Well-
Of course I got a question.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, look, I can tell you doing this is no fun, and I have to, a lot of the information on here, it only comes from the tax office.
Sure. Yeah, one of my gripes today was the fact that all my continuing education stuff, not one time did they try to teach us anything about this. So, bear with me.
And that's fine. But believe me, this is,
They might not ever have anyone want to be a board member if they did.
Yeah.
Because it is,
But
it
one-
is complicated.
one
There's
of the
no doubt.
lines, if you really want to get down to that, see what happened to us last year, that's one thing that sticks out on here, that stuck out to me, is if you look at, where is it at? Line 15, for how much taxes were refunded this past year? $164,000.
Why do they refund taxes?
Either miscalculations, people didn't put in their homestead, didn't claim it as a homestead, and they were able to go back. Or I think there was still a lot of miscalculations from the SB2, SB12 implementation. But I can tell you this, what was it, from July 15th till August 20th, 21st, we did not get one tax deposit because they had been issued so big of a set of refunds, that it took that long for them to catch up. Go.
I have a question. Are you gonna ask her?
Well, I'm not
You
on
were
this,
talking,
that was the
so-
only question I had on this form. I got other questions, but that's the only
Okay, I have a
question.
question on the form.
Yeah.
So when we look at the tax rate, obviously, the one that we're looking to approve is higher than last year because we're raising the INS side
Correct.
from 45 to 50.
We're
which is-
raising our, yeah.
I get that. So part of this, I see that that's based on the $100,000 homestead exemption. And I know they have to vote on in November whether or not we're going to move up to 140,000.
Yes.
So is that what the tax rate figured into the budget part of this?
Yes.
As to how that will change? So are the
No, our
budget based on the
tax-
140
our
or is
tax-
it based on the 100?
Our tax rate and the calculations I've done are based on the 140,000.
Okay.
Because I think there's nobody.
We anticipate
Yeah.
that
There's
everyone
nobody
will
that
vote for a tax
So the
rate.
140 is going to happen,
Yes.
but
Yes, and
okay, but as far as the voters go, so, and most people, that's going to equate to a savings of some sort that they should
Yes.
realize on that.
well,
Do we
actually,
know how much of this is going to pull, like if it were to stay, if we were to stay at the current rate that we had last year, how much of that savings are we pulling back by raising the rate? Do we, I mean,
well,
I'm assuming that people will still realize some savings, but do
well,
we know
actually,
what that is?
when I had to publish the notice in the newspaper, there's a section in there that calculates how much of a saving, or either how much your taxes are going to go up or down,
Or down.
based on the average homestead.
Correct, that's what I mean, on the average. I mean,
Okay, but on that average, when you look at last year's average compared to this year's average with the new exemptions, the average taxpayer is going to save like $536, I think is what it was.
and
So
do we-
now,
And so adjusting this by that 5 cents,
adjusting it by the 4 cents, I'd have to go back and calculate, but I will,
it won't take, but they will realize more than half of what.
oh, they'll realize way more
It's
than
not
half.
going to, okay.
Yes, I believe they'll realize way more than half of what we're taking
What
away.
we're proposing.
Yes.
Right. And that's why you see a lot of times when they're coming back to ask voters for a bond, saying, this will not be a tax increase, even though the actual ballot language forces us to say it is. But that's because you have the combination of the compression and then this new legislation adding more homestead exemption. Even when you see an increase in that debt coming in, that compression and the exemptions are keeping them lower than they have been. So,
Yeah, I think it's just important to state that we know we're raising the tax rate,
correct.
but you will still, with the 140, everybody is still going to see a reduction. Or
Yes,
the
ma'am.
average home in
Right.
the Navarro area will see a reduction in their tax bill. They're not actually going to realize an increase.
Yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
So, because
That's
what
correct.
people are going to focus on is Navarro raised taxes. Okay, yes, but
Well, but
you're not
again,
going to see that. And so-
right, and which is a good thing, but remember to, when we passed the bond, we did tell people the first year it would be 46 cents, the next year it
Yes,
would
we
get to
did.
50. So we were very straightforward and very open about what was going to occur. And as we move forward, as we continue to sell bonds, I've still got another 35 million to sell that hasn't been sold. So next year, I fully anticipate still being at that 50 cents. So, and for the end of the future, as we continue to grow and have to issue more bonds. Okay, so you look like you got a question.
Well, I do have questions. I just didn't know if we're moving on to something else. She was still on the form and you're on the form, so I didn't.
Well, I'm done.
Okay.
Well, no, so my question is, part of this is understanding the process. Like when we authorize the raises, did we authorize the raises based off an anticipated voting to increase the tax rate? Or is that's not really the same, right? Because just for clarity here,
Okay, for clarity,
you gave me a raise, now
I'm-
you're raising taxes. So
think of me as a psychic, okay?
Well,
And
I
we're
have
doing
been, I don't know how it's a Ouija board what you got.
It feels like it some days. But we do have to, in some ways, we do not have a certified set of values until July. But in April, I got a set of preliminary values.
Sure.
Okay, and with a range. And once I've got that range, I can start plugging in numbers and and I'm using the same spreadsheets. I did the MCR calculation to see where we would fall, so I could try to figure out where that tax rate would be. So that the only place we're raising taxes is on the debt service side. So when we're looking at raises, I'm looking at property values, I'm factoring in the increase in the homestead exemption. It's part of the reason normally we would be looking at salary schedules in April or May, and sometime in May before people left. But we waited this time because we were waiting to see what the legislature was going to do. And until we had that, then we could anticipate what that revenue would be and determine what our funding would be. But part of that is using that preliminary values from the appraisal district where they try to give me a low number and a high number, and I even try to go in between there to figuring we'll fall somewhere in between. And that's based on, I'm doing it based on what I anticipate the tax rate to be.
And I may only ask that question in this form just so that it's out there in Never Land that
Yeah.
the raises had
It's not
zero
tied
to
to
do.
that.
Exactly.
It's not, no, it goes.
Because you already hear grumbling and trying to get the word out. This is strictly just debt service.
Yes.
Debt
Yes.
service, debt service.
And that's what I was going to say, is through all of that talking, I think it's really important to note, the increase is in debt service, which was communicated to voters when we said, this is what we're asking for in a bond to build these things and complete these projects, and it will increase your tax rate to make this happen. When we're talking about raises, that's maintenance and operations. That's not being raised for that purpose.
And it's actually a very unusual year that I think there's going to be a lot of school districts that have no compression on that maintenance and operations rate this year because of the increase in homestead exemptions. So I think the only ones you may see that have some compression are if they don't have a lot of rooftops. As we're mainly rooftops with very little industry, so that has a very large impact on our property values and what our tax rate will be set at. Because again, that tax rate is based on the state giving us a number.
But I am reading the M&O rate as 0.7228, which is what we had in 24-25,
Yes,
and also we are keeping it for 25-26.
that is correct.
The exact same thing.
And it is the exact same rate because our compression stayed, the compressed tax rate approved by the comptroller, or not the comptroller, but from the TEA was 0.6169. We have to get that number, and then we add our approved enrichment tax, which was long ago approved by the voters, and we have had for an extended period of time. As long as I've been here, it's been that number.
How long will that stay on?
Until the board would decide to reduce it. You can always the board could always choose to go lower if it chose.
Oh.
Okay. But nobody, in this day and age, we have to be very careful because, again, if we go lower, we also start impacting state aid, and state aid comes down. So we have to be very careful about what we do and what that impact is because it has a major impact on both sides.
I would also say if you were then to change your mind down the road and say, we really need to increase that, we want to go out for a VATRE, those are much harder to pass. And hard to communicate what that does.
Yeah.
It's not that they can't be successful. I've been successful in a district that was able to pass them, but it takes a lot of educating to get a VATRE
And before you can even begin that process, now you have to go through a specific audit.
Correct.
We have to have a whole entirely separate audit to prove somehow that we do need it.
I just wasn't sure if it was a term, like, this is on there for 10, 20 years.
No, there is no term.
Okay.
So my other question then, on your public information sheet, right, that's what this is?
Yes, that was the one published in the newspaper.
Yeah, it was 562, not 536, so just.
Okay. I was doing it from memory, okay? I transposed, I shifted to 563 and then it's still 536, so.
So, just being devil's advocate here, you did put on this sheet that we can maintain operations at a lower tax rate. Is that how I read that?
It is, but it isn't.
Okay.
Okay, that is again, it goes back to a manual kind of calculation, generates the same aid theoretically.
Okay.
Okay, I will tell you, I didn't try to calculate that. I got that off of our, one of those spreadsheets that we use.
I would love to see your folder that has all these spreadsheets.
No,
And
it's
how they're-
actually, it's a very large folder
Yeah.
on a computer, yes, on the computer files are large.
Yeah.
And I have different versions labeled at
Exactly.
every time. But that is, basically you're trying to equalize the revenue from last year. Just saying that's how, we could generate the exact same amount of revenue last year, but we need more revenue.
Okay, so that's just revenue only, that's
Yes.
not, okay.
It doesn't account to the increase in expenses. It just says, this is how, if you wanted to raise the exact same revenue per student as you did last year, that's what you could do. But that does not take into account the fact of increased expenses or anything else.
Okay.
And again, I'm not real happy with that calculation. I don't think any of us like that calculation. But it also affects, that particular calculation also affects how we have to word the ordinance to adopt the tax rate, which has, if you've read through the actual, that wording of that ordinance, it is very convoluted.
Yeah.
But that is,
I'm gonna wait to ask my question about
That
that,
is-
because
but that
it's a
is-
little confusing in the wording. of that
it is
particular
very
action.
confusing, and it is very, very strange, but it is what is written into the law of those, I have to use those exact words, unfortunately. Because I agree with you, it is confusing. Anything else?
Anybody else on the public hearing? Okay, hearing nothing else, let's move on. Public participation?
There is none.
No public participation. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, action items. We'll start with approval of the 25-26 budget.
Again, what you have the same budget information that's summarized slightly differently, but you are adopting a budget, the exact budget we just discussed. The numbers are the same. You're adopting it by function, and so that in the future, if budget amendments are necessary, those budget amendments will be done internally. We can move those funds in between any inside those functions without your approval, as we may need to shift dollars. If we need to shift dollars across functions, those will come to you as you've seen them in the past. But the budget you're seeing to approve is exactly what you've seen and we've discussed previously.
Any other questions or discussion on?
Just for knowledge purposes, like you have a line item for $335,000 for capital expenditures. Is there a plan typically? Where is that generated from? Is that just like, do you know things are retiring and you know what they're going to be replaced?
And those particular instances, we have there are the 3 specific items set aside for in that particular area, which is the baseball field and 2 vehicles.
Okay.
And there's a little bit in there for some road work because we tend to have something go with road work every year.
And Mr. Frederick, I do want to remind you, as well as the rest of the board, that in September, we will complete all of our department projections for the next 5 to 10 years of planned out of lifespan or needed either capital outlay or project-based supports for replacement items, those kinds of things, so that I think we all understand, and the team as a whole understands that for budgeting purposes, it is extremely helpful for us to see that while that could be adjusted, if we say, for example, band uniforms usually last about 7 years, but if we've increased parades and they've been wearing them much more and, you know, we see that it needs to be replaced in year 5 or year 6, we're able to adjust that. Paul and the team in the business office is able to see that as we plan, as well as make sure that, you know, we're utilizing interest from bond monies in the most productive way, you know, meeting the legal requirements to meet some of those growth needs, those replacement needs. So absolutely, you'll be able to see that we have a plan in place for that.
No, it was just stuck out from the, because the $250,000 credit the next year, so everything else kind of flowed, but that one had an
Well,
increase.
yeah, because usually I just keep some in there for something, but
Okay.
that's a very large project which you normally would not see.
Okay.
And with all the new construction and especially and everywhere else, I would certainly hope that there would not need to be a new project that big anymore.
Not for a little while.
Not for a little while, after I'm retired. And I will say we didn't talk about it, but earlier, part of that, when we discussed the budget, or there was an attachment in there for fund balance. I think one of the things we will be having some discussions on is there was things that were designated many, many years ago by the board. Most of those are like out of date and way underfunded probably, or they don't need to be done anymore because they're being addressed otherwise. So I think sometime here in the next few months, we will come with an agenda item with some ideas about where to reallocate those designated funds for the future use.
The sheet was in there that showed.
It does.
Yes,
Right,
it
the
does
sheet
show
was in
where
there
we're.
that showed those, what we had those.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of them are actually projects that will likely come up in what we ultimately recommend to the board for the next bond proposal. You know, things like air conditioning, you know, the weight room in the annex. We know we have to replace air conditioning in the annex. We know we have to replace the roof. There's also references to the roof at the elementary. So, you know, there was some forward thinking, obviously, that the numbers attached to that won't get the full project done, so that will have to come through bond. But we can talk through, do we want to keep that designated and build it in to the funds available for that project and subtract it from bond, or are we going to fully fund it from bond and reallocate it to something else? We'll bring that to you in the next couple of months.
I think I have one more.
Yes.
You're gonna nail it too.
Oh,
On the public information page, it says that the fund balances for maintenance and operations and interest and sinking is $9 million and $1 million respectively. But, and this is probably just me not knowing, but it reads on this estimate over here, fund balance in general is gonna be an estimated $15 million.
correct.
And it is 14 million. So what's the difference between the 9 million and the 14 million?
I take out what we have designated, okay, which is those designated items that are set aside currently.
Okay.
And then I also take out a portion of the future expense that we normally don't get funded on from TDA, and we're allowed to take that out. So I say, basically that's what, if all things went perfectly, or I would assume that to be a free fund balance.
What's available?
What's available for like
Actual
any potential.
available.
What's available, correct.
Okay.
It's like
All right.
pending, like the word.
What would be available for an emergency,
Okay.
which we pray we never have.
Correct. And do we still, as far as like the designated fund balance components, there used to be for things like technology expenditures, are those categories still the same?
Yes.
As they were, as far as like what the board designated as?
Yes, they have not changed, other than the fact that this year I did use some for some of the technology purchase, for some
Right.
small technology
Yeah, because we've
purchases.
had the technology designation for a
Yeah.
long time.
Right, there's
Yes,
still
and I
don't recall that we've
300,000
actually
in there.
voted to designate fund balance towards really anything else.
There were some other designations, again, a long time ago. Most of them carried for years.
Right.
One of them being there's $1 million set aside for purchase of land. which right now, we're good on that basis, so, you know.
But we've kept those designations.
We have kept those designations.
I need to go ahead and do that, so for bond projects.
Yes.
Updates,
Yes, if
if
some-
we have one
yes.
planned every
2 years?
years or
Yes,
whatever,
ma'am.
Yes.
for the unforeseeable future?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that is in your packet, so you have it listed and what's in each of those designated fund categories.
Where's
Yeah.
that at?
That's
It's in-
in your bond,
it's in-
I mean, in
it's
your.
in the budget.
In your
It's-
budget, if you'll go into
I
board
print it off
book,
because it'd be easier.
yeah, if
On
you
the
go
very
into
last
board
page.
book, it's there
Yes,
too.
very last.
Where's board book?
Oh, wait, you don't have it?
If, I can get it,
This one?
I just was looking
No.
at it, approval
No,
of
there's a
the
separate
budget.
item, it's a separate item. Hang on.
If you go into,
It's a separate item which may not have been printed.
Is it item
no, it's if you go
It's there.
If you
into,
go into the,
if you go into the hearing,
Okay.
it's one of the attachments.
Oh, the fund balance?
yes, the
Public
fund
hearing.
balance attachment.
It says
It's
fund
the third
balance.
attachment.
Yes.
Yes,
If you go into
It's a
public
separate
hearing,
attachment.
third attachment.
and it's on, the second page of that goes into the
Yeah,
detail
okay.
of what is
So
there.
like, it starts with sidewalk and bridge from tennis court toward concession stand.
Yeah.
You'll notice one of the things that we had talked about, obviously, is the air conditioning in the annex, and it says air conditioning, weight room, but all that's allocated is 40,000. That's not gonna cover your cost for that,
And-
but
and there
there
had-
is an allocated fund.
And
for
part
it.
of that was, a long time ago, there was a $50,000 allocation for dugouts at the softball field, which we took that off as we redid the entire softball field.
Correct.
So it has been, some items have been used, but again, that $50,000 was in nowhere near enough.
Okay. My missing link, thank you.
No problem.
Should be part of the board education thing there.
You can come by anytime, I will walk
I
you
don't,
through
you
everything.
really want me to come by? I'll have lots of questions.
You can come by, just after September 3rd. No. September 3rd, I'm rolling over rolling over into the new budget and everything and getting it all set up. So
I
after
will
September
put-
3rd, I'm
I'll
fine.
go put a panic button in his office, so if he's like, I'm hitting the place where I'm gonna retire, if I don't get a break right now, then I'm gonna tell him to hit it, and I'll be like, hey Joel, we gotta have you come back later. But
I'll
for
make sure
sure,
the only other person on earth that likes spreadsheets more than him.
that's it.
Wow, I'm really intrigued by your spreadsheet organization.
Yeah. You would not believe how many spreadsheets I have done.
Oh.
How many I have.
And if you do want to go, Joel, there is actually a budget boot camp that is offered. That is a training that, you know, is offered, and they actually walk you through how you take that spreadsheet and how you enter in the different calculations. I have attended that training. I have also watched people walk out of that training between 30 minutes into the training to 2 hours into the training, just completely overwhelmed. But if you are fascinated by it and you're interested, that they do offer that training, we'd be happy to have you guys attend.
One of the 3 jobs they told us we had.
Yep.
So I
Absolutely.
want to be good at it.
Well, what I can tell you, what has become the most difficult thing to do, and since it's always been a little difficult, it's become more difficult, is projecting the tax revenue collections. That has become the most difficult thing with all of the SB2, SB12, things that now they're adjusting frozen stuff. It used to just be frozen, so you knew what it was. Now I'm guessing at what it is, and they're guessing at what it is until those numbers are actually calculated. So it has become, that's become even more difficult. So. And that takes a fun spreadsheet.
And like we shared, they will send, were we on the 6th or the 7th version?
One was on version, Omar's on version 7.
Yeah.
The last version I have from Mo Casey was 3, and I didn't go out and check anymore, because at a certain point I have to cut it off and say, okay, I've got to deal with what I've got.
Right.
I can't keep trying to update every spreadsheet, because I can't just, it's hard to copy and paste all the numbers in. I really hate copying and pasting the numbers in, because then I lose track of my formulas that I built in to change those numbers. So I like to keep track of how I raised a number from one piece to another piece. So that when those formulas are built in, I can keep track of it.
We are very grateful for Paul and his expertise.
Amen.
He did find a couple of errors in the early spreadsheets and let them know. So part of why they were revised was because Paul found errors. So definitely thankful and grateful for Paul and his team.
Anything else?
No other questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 25-26 budget for the general fund, food service fund, and debt service fund as presented.
I've got a motion by Dan, a second by Donna. I move to vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, B, approval of the ordinance setting the 2025-26 tax rate of 1.2228.
Okay, this is the tax rate that supports the budget that you just adopted. The ordinance language is a little unusual, but it is how it has to be worded, and it's largely because the first calculation where it says it's effectively a 0.97% decrease is because we're comparing it to that total, that rate to maintain that 2348. So that number you're comparing there. Later, at the bottom, where we talk about it's a 9.8 or 9.68% increase, now we're comparing it to that other number you talked about, that 0.6509, and we're only comparing it to the maintenance and operations rate, and we're telling people that their maintenance and operation rate on a $100,000 home will change by zero, even though we're raising the tax. It's how it is worded in the law. It is required. I do not
Really?
I do not try to explain it. You can call your legislator to talk about it.
Right, so when it says the tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operations, it's referring to the homeowners, not our maintenance and operations dollars coming in. Because if it's this 0.722 on the M&O side for us last year, and it's the same 0.722.
The bottom part is, the bottom, where again, we're back to comparing two different things again.
That's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
so-
When it says maintenance and operations, then last year's rate is the maintenance and operations portion that everybody's paying. The taxpayer's paying, not what we're receiving on our maintenance and operations that goes into the budget.
Now you got me confused. I'm sorry. Okay, so you're talking about the bottom section, right?
I'm talking about the middle sentence, that this tax rate will raise
More
more
tax.
taxes for maintenance and operations.
Yeah, it's because-
So when it says maintenance and operations, I'm thinking of that as what we're using to pay, that's the
That is,
0.722 on our budget.
if our maintenance and operations rate, and I think it's our property values, when you do the calculations, I said it was a little low. When you're doing those calculations, the property values are slightly above what the taxable value was last year.
Mhm.
So by that, it says you will raise more taxes.
Okay,
So because the property values went up.
increased, not because of the.
Not
the
because
tax
of a rate increase, not
How
because
does
of,
that-
again,
It reads the tax rate's gonna increase, if it's really the property values that are increasing.
all it is, yeah, but that's,
Right.
again, we're back to the language that's required. It's-
Right, I just wanna make sure I understand the language is required, I just wanna make sure that I understand what I'm voting on.
You're voting
And
that
then
the
I'm
tax,
voting on the fact that
even though the
values are
tax
higher.
rate is staying the same for maintenance and operations.
Right.
But because the overall property values increased slightly.
We're gonna get
we
more.
would theoretically get more in taxes.
For the same rate,
For the same rate.
even though the taxpayer's not paying anymore.
That's correct. Even though they're actually getting a tax decrease
I
for the whole
think the
year.
language is saying that the tax rate will raise more taxes, meaning more revenue
Yes.
coming in. That's where it gets confusing, because it sounds like you're raising taxes. We're
Correct.
raising,
More
because of the
revenue.
property value, you're raising more money.
Correct, and that's why I was asking,
Revenue,
because
yeah.
because it says the tax rate's
Yeah.
gonna raise more, and it's like, well, the tax rate's the same as last year. I just wanted to make sure I'm
You are correct.
You are
It's very
correct. You are correct.
confusing.
I'm explaining, because if you read this, somebody's gonna go, well, you said you didn't raise it, well.
That's right.
it's-
Well, I mean, if you read the last one, we tell them, we raised your taxes by this much, but we were gonna pay zero.
Yeah, It's the same as the bond language on a voter's ballot.
Yes.
that
Yes.
says
Yes.
This will increase your taxes, even though
Yeah.
we're saying it's not going to. So it's the
Correct.
same silly wording. Okay.
And the language, it's just very specific language, and that has to be adopted, and it would not be our choice. I mean, I had one, I think we did it a couple of years ago, where we said we were raising your taxes by X%, and you will see it, and this will be it came to a negative number when we put in there, it was a negative
Yeah.
$50 or something like that. So they were getting a tax increase, even though I had to say, their taxes were going down, even though I had to say your taxes are going up. It's not a, and you will have some people that will argue, I've seen the argument that because your homestead is $100,000, then a $100,000 home never has an increase in taxes. I disagree with that argument, and I'm not going to take a chance on it. So, but I do know that there are some districts that will always put zero on there because they'll say, once it got to $100,000, they say, hey, there's no tax on $100,000 home. Yeah. So, I'm not one of those who believes that that's the intent of the law. Any other questions?
Any other questions, any other discussion?
Welcome to our world.
I looked at it first off, I'm like, why would we write that?
Because the legislature wrote it that way.
But once you said that, I'm like, okay, I'm just voting for 1.228, moving on.
There you
That's
go. It's the same, and Dr. Gosh is 100% right. It's the same reason we get frustrated with the ballots and bonds that say this is a tax increase, even though you will tell your voters this won't raise your taxes. You know, I think in an age of transparency, our legislature has complicated it by trying to be quote unquote transparent. I would just say, you know, the more people hear from the constituents that you've made it more confusing than it needs to be, perhaps that will make some change and correction in our next legislative session.
With no more questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Sure. I move to approve that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $1.2228. Is that you just supposed to say that?
1.228. You
Okay.
just
Well,
said
there's a
that.
dollar sign in front of it.
Yes.
Which is effectively a 0.97% decrease in the tax rate. This tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operations than last year's tax rate. The tax rate will effectively be raised by 9.68% and will raise taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $0.
Second.
I've got a motion by Joel and a second by Dan. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0.
It sounds even worse when you have to read it out loud.
All right, next item, C, budget amendment, 2025-2026 budget.
This is a budget amendment to pull the funds. We had a surplus that we budgeted to start with, as you know, on the budget you adopted. This will use some of that surplus to cover the total cost of the base price that we received on the baseball field for its renovation, which is your next item.
Any other questions or discussion? No questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the attached budget amendment.
I'll second.
I've got a motion by Dan, a second by Joel. Any more discussion? No discussion, entertain a vote, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Next item, D, approval for the renovation of the current high school baseball field.
So we did an RFP for this process. We received 4 bids This is the low bid. They are a company that has done work for them before, so I think everybody was comfortable with it. They're I think familiar with the field as well. So they came in at the low bid, and the others were far in excess. It was kind of just seeing some of the differences in price makes you amazed. But everybody was comfortable. We had Coach Hill look at it and okay. So everybody's comfortable with that firm. And we're going to do the base. Just so you know, I did hand each of you what was in the bid, so you could see what was in the base. We just didn't put everything in there about what was in the base bid. So you can see on the front and then a little bit on the back what's in that base bid. Hauling off existing, we're going to redo the irrigation. They're going to do the irrigation, tilling, installing new soil, sod installation, doing the infield mix and conditioning it, the new bases, plugs, and including the new double first base that's going to be required, and they're going to relocate the existing scoreboard. So all of that was included in the base bid. Since it was over, we did not look at doing any of the optional items, and even those, as you can see, those varied widely on some of those optional items.
Did want to highlight that we are being proactive on the UIL rule. That does not go into effect for the double first base requirement until 27, but we will have that double first base for our existing fields here as well as the new fields at the high school. So we'll be in full compliance prior to that ruling going into mandatory effect. And that is for safety, for those of you who are not aficionados of the sport. That is for safety.
I won't make any comment on where I think that.
Yes, we know that there are varying opinions about it, but UIL's ruling on it is.
Sometimes you gotta teach that first baseman a lesson.
And sometimes the base runner needs an elbow check.
As I said, there's varying opinions.
No, I get it. I was like, why?
Buddy.
Sometimes the excitement of the game is extinguished when we consider safety.
Yes. But sometimes it's better, because I've seen some, anyway. Sometimes the safety is a little better.
Yes, sir.
It can get carried away.
Safety
Sometimes we have to bring
first.
Pete Rose back.
Yeah.
Safety first.
I don't know about that. He took it a little too far. Any questions? No.
Any more questions or discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the use of the CT Fieldscapes for the renovation of the high school baseball field with the base bid and no alterations or alternates included.
Second.
I've got a motion by Melissa, a second by Joel. Any more discussion? No discussion. All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0.
So sorry, when is this going to start?
It will start immediately after we award the bid following the vote, and it is to be concluded in December.
Good.
Yes, we want to make sure we have a field ready, as our baseball and softball next door will not be, are projected to not be complete till April. So we know we need everything working at
That
this
is why we
location.
timed it this way, so we could get it done.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda, item 5, the reports. Any question on the financial report? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, consent agenda. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? No questions or discussion? I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Second.
I got a motion by Donna, a second by Dan. Any more discussion? No discussion, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. With that, at this time, it's 6:54 PM, and we will stand adjourned.